it's overly broad in prohibiting any employee of the federal government from cajoling or arguing with a member of the media about a story. Employees of the federal government have First Amendment rights too. And if, let's say, President Trump or President Biden disagreed with something that was going to be written about them, this would make it a crime for them to call up the social media company and say, that's a lie, take it down, this is outrageous. That's not censorship. Censorship is when the government shuts something off. This is arguing to try and convince someone else to shut it off. And that's the right people have, whether they're in government or outside of government. Obviously, there are places where people go over the line and make threats and suggest you're going to lose your license if you don't do the following thing. That, if it's narrow enough to be defined in that kind of way, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But to say that no employee of the government, from the president on down to the millions of people who work in the government, can speak with a social media company or a legacy media company and express their point of view that an article is wrong or that an avenue they're going down is wrong, that would shut off free speech on the part of the administration and power, or frankly, employees that have nothing to do with one party or the other. So in my view, it's a piece of, it's an amendment that is overly broad and hasn't considered what's going to happen when there's a Republican administration.
The First Amendment really isn't about protecting the speech of government workers. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It's about limitations on government involvement with speech. It doesn't say that where you're employed that there might not be regulations of what can be said. Every employee of a private company knows you can't run in the office and say your boss stinks. I mean, there are limitations on your speech based on your employment, and they have nothing to do with the First Amendment, because the First Amendment doesn't have really to do with employment. The First Amendment has to do with Congress shall pass no law. So if Twitter says bad things about me and puts up bad things and takes my down, I have no recourse against Twitter. Same with Facebook. I'm mad. I hate that YouTube has taken my speeches down. I don't do business with them anymore because I think they're bigoted, biased, and wrong-headed on this. But as far as threats, what we do know from the Twitter files is that the government was making threats. We also know this from the depositions in Missouri versus Biden. These were overt threats, and this is what's going to make this case so strong. When this gets to the Supreme Court, I think that the free speech advocates are going to win. This is a lawsuit began by Senator Eric Schmitt when he was the Attorney General. But I think the evidence is pretty strong that there were threats. There were threats of antitrust action against the companies if they didn't take the material down. There was also threats of, we will remove your 230 protection. Section 230 gives them liability protection, and they were overt threats and threats in writing, basically saying, if you don't take this down, you know, your 230 protection of liability could go away. We may try to penetrate that liability protection. I think the government should be absolutely prohibited, without question. I think it should be as draconian as you probably can make it, and the exception would be illegal. The government is allowed to meet with illegal, but things that are an opinion, the government has no business in this. And it's just where you are on the spectrum of wanting to defend the First Amendment. But there is no real, I think it's important to know, there's no First Amendment right of everybody in government to say whatever they want.
I wish you could just shut your big yapper.